Shalom. I'm Rabbi Josh Caruso from Anshe Chesed, Fairmount Temple. It is the unwelcome honor for me to be here today and to shepherd Barbara to her final resting place. As I was sharing with her family, how lucky I was to have known her and her beautiful smile for all these years. I know you pay her honor and her family honor by being here today. In the words of Ecclesiastes, a season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for dancing and a time for wailing, a time for birthing and a time for dying, a time for speaking and a time for silence, a time for seeking, a time for losing. The time of mourning is a complicated time filled with many emotions and memories, both bitter and sweet. We begin our service with the recitation of psalms and prayers, thus linking Barbara's life with the 3,000-year-old tradition of the people Israel and the eternity of God. I invite you to join with me in the recitation of Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. After a while, you learn the subtle difference between holding a hand and chaining a soul. And you learn that love doesn't mean leaning, and that company doesn't always mean security. And you learn that kisses aren't contracts and presents aren't promises. And you begin to accept your defeats with your head up and your eyes straight ahead, with the grace of a woman or a man, not the grief of a child. And you learn to build all your roads on today, because tomorrow's ground is too uncertain for plans, and futures have a way of falling down in mid-flight. After a while, you learn that even sunshine burns if you bask too much. So you plant your own garden, decorate your own soul, instead of waiting for someone to bring you flowers. And you learn that you really can endure, and that you really are strong, and that you really have worth. And you learn, and you learn. With every goodbye, you learn. In this week's Torah portion, Lech Lecha, we uncover the birth pangs of the people of Israel. We learn about Abraham and Sarah, and the journey of the Jewish people begins. God calls out to Abraham, saying, Lech Lecha, Lech Lecha, go forth from your land, from your birthplace, from your father's house. In those words, God instructs Abraham to leave everything he knew for a new life. And almost 4,000 years later, we can look back and see the legacy that Abraham left us. Abraham ventured into a new world, new lands, uncharted territory. Abraham created a life for himself, a life separate and distinct from the life in which he was raised. He became self-sustaining. He became a self-made person. Abraham was an individual. When I think of Barb Herschman, I recall a self-made woman, a woman who managed to leverage all of the resources she had in the world, and she made a life for herself. It was as if God said, "You have a beautiful family. Take them with you, but lech lecha, lechi lach. Go forward. Choose your path. Find your way that is inimitably you." Barb's life was authentically Barb Herschman. She wasn't trying to be anybody else. She was trying to be and striving to be and successfully was herself. She lived a life filled with laughter and lots of it. Some bad humor and some jokes that she couldn't quite land because she was laughing too hard while she was telling the joke. Filled with friends, filled with lots of games. Barb had a heart of gold, went out of her way to help out friends whenever they needed her, and she never made them feel like it was an inconvenience for her. She was happy to help. Her sense of self and connectedness to others, though, began way back in her childhood, raised by Shirley and Lester, her parents. May their memories be for blessing, and alongside her loving siblings, Neil and Francine. Barb had a wicked sense of humor and really never abandoned her inner child until her very last breaths. And yet, as Neil and Fran shared, Barbara was reliably steady and thoughtful when it came to taking care of family, especially after her parents died. It was Barb who took control and made decisions when the moment was tender and fraught with emotion. She was practical in this way and did what needed to be done. In her inimitable way, Barb knew what it meant to be a big sister and to take care of her family. She was a deeply faithful Jew, and she even became an adult bat mitzvah in her 30s. In my many years at Fairmount Temple, Barb was a constant, especially at our Kabbalat Shabbat services in the sanctuary. You could always find her easily because she was sitting right up front row, with her good friend Anne by her side. While I was leading services, my gaze would often meet hers, and she invariably had that beautiful, contented smile on her face. You know that smile. You know that look. It imparted the message that she was exactly where she wanted to be. It seemed like this woman who was ubiquitous in our life at Fairmount Temple was the most comfortable in her skin of anyone. She just effused this sense of, I'm here. This is me. I'm glad to be here. This is the moment. This is where I want to be. She reached out to me and other clergy members during moments of challenge in her life. But you knew that her Judaism was a salve for her. You know, it was not always easy for Barb. She smiled through a lot of her pain, both physical and emotional. But she pushed through. She lived her life on her terms. She worked for a good number of years as a reservationist with Marriott Hotels. She was incredibly talented at managing people on the phone and regularly earned bonuses and raises for her good work. No wonder We got to experience her positive energy and good vibes every day, and we didn't even have to get a hotel room. You know, she never changed that outlook when she was on the phones. She was the same Barb. She was passionate about mahjong, played with 3 different groups of friends. And yes, games of all sorts were a favorite for Barb. She had a soft spot for gambling, and sometimes that meant buying too many scratch-off tickets, and sometimes that meant playing the slots at the casinos. With that said, she always knew the limits of her spending, never took it so far. There was a pragmatic part of her that understood the boundaries of her life. And you didn't always know it, because if you'd meet her, you might think maybe things could be a little out of sorts. But she seemed to be able to control and understand what her world needed. She loved knitting and needlepoint, often making creations for her nephews and nieces. She never liked being sedentary, and as such made sure to stay active by going out with friends and filling her days with people. She liked to be with people. She drew her energy from being with others. We all benefited from her caring and her kindness. She was completely in love with her nieces and nephews, both by blood and by marriage. And of course, she adopted Terry into her family like one of her own, Neil's wife, and her nieces, Samantha and Sarah, her nephews, Alan and Jason, and of course, Lee and Melissa came along. She loved them all. And as was imparted to me just before services, she liked to grab your cheeks. And she was an equal opportunity cheek grabber. And of course, she fell doubly in love, triply in love with her newest niece and nephew, her great niece and nephew, Emma and Nathan, who thankfully got to experience a little bit of their great aunt, but certainly not enough. These last few weeks were certainly trying for Barb. I remember visiting her at Hillcrest, and even though she was waiting on the results of what would turn out to be a grave diagnosis, she was still smiling and telling jokes. Friends, it was as if I was visiting her home or I was seeing her at temple. She just happened to be lying on a bed, horizontal, but you'd never know it. I walked in, and she became the raconteur, just holding court. Good to see you, Rabbi. Have I told you this joke? As Neil and Fran shared, Barb faced her days and her final days, her final breaths, with courage and bravery. Again, one of those things that you might, if you didn't know her well, you might not think that someone who could be so juvenile at times and jokey could be so mature about that final chapter in our lives. The thing that frightens us the most, taking our last breaths. There was something about Barb that felt such gratitude for living every day, somehow prepared her for those final days and for those final breaths. A sense of gratitude for what she had, what she loved, the people in her life, the time she shared, squeezing every moment, everything out of every moment, consuming life the best she could. We were all blessed to know her, all blessed to remember that smile, to be able to recall it again and again. that beautiful picture in her obituary. That smile is still very much alive. Barb lived her life out loud. We were the beneficiaries. Zichronah livracha. May her memory forever be a blessing, and let us say, Amen. We pause for a moment as we think about Barb, what she meant to us, the images and the piece of the puzzle that she brought to each one of our lives. If you're able, I invite you now to please rise for the chanting of El Malei Rachamim, the memorial prayer. El Malei Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Amsei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei HaShechina, במעלות קדושים מותרים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמת ברברה בת שרלי ולסטר, שהלכה לעולמה, בגן עדן תהי מנוחתה. אנא בעל הרחמים, הסתיריה בסתר כנפיך לעולמים, וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתה, אדוני ונחלתה, ותנוח בשלום על משכבה, ונאמר אמן. El Malei Rachamim, exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure, to the soul of our dear friend, Barbara Herschman. She has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. May Barbara rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. As we turn to the conclusion of this service, family will immediately move to the graveside burial at Mount Olive. And following the burial, family will receive friends at the Herschman House Social Center, 1229 Drury Court in Mayfield Heights. That's the Herschman House Social Center, 1229 Drury Court in Mayfield Heights. Family will be sitting today following services and interment until 6 p.m., just today, until 6 p.m. tonight. Friends who wish to do so may contribute in Barbara's honor to the American Cancer Society.